Welcome everyone to the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network event, Women for Climate Justice, Leading Solutions on the Front Lines of the Climate Crisis. My name is Osprey Orielle Lake, and I am the founder and executive director of WECAN, or the Women's Earth and Climate Action Network. Before we start, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge this very challenging time for many people and welcome you all to a space for us to be together from all over the world. Not only a difficult time around the world, but here at COP29, where we're really struggling for our agenda from the people's movements. I want to take a deep breath and be grounded together with the earth under our feet and the skies above us from wherever you are, and for those of us who are also watching on the live stream. I want to open the session with some contextualizing comments, and then we'll hear from this truly incredible panel of women leaders from different regions of the world. So first I'll introduce them and then I'll make some comments. First, we're going to be hearing from Zukiswa White. She is the coordinator for the Women and Gender constituency from South Africa. Then we'll be hearing from Maho Andrade Serra. She is a Quechua woman, Director of Economy and Community Development, Terena, and leader of the Economy and Community Development from Ecuador. Then we'll be hearing from Eriel Deranger from the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation. She's the Executive Director of Indigenous Climate Action from Canada. And then we will be hearing from Gaia Bastista. She is a Tomi Toltec. She's the co-founder and Executive Director of Re-Earth Initiative from Mexico and the USA. And then closing out will be Casey Camp-Horinek from the Ponca Nation. She's a Ponca Nation's Environmental Ambassador, and we're very honored that she is a WECAN board member and project coordinator also from the USA. Today, I stand with millions of women in all their diversity around the world who are working tirelessly to protect and defend our planet. Women and their actions and voices are at the heart of climate resistance, resilience, and solutions. And this is what we want to make clear is the incredible role that women have in addressing what we are really calling a polycrisis. Many women have gathered here at COP29 because we are calling our governments to deploy real solutions that confront the scale of the climate crisis and respect the rights and dignity of our communities and all life on Earth. This year at COP29, the stakes could not possibly be higher. The latest emissions gap report paints a terrifying picture. Our world is on track to surpass 3 degrees of warming, and this is a path that is a death sentence for millions and a disaster for every living being on our planet. The time for half measures is over. Our survival demands bold action now. And I want to get to some very specific points today. First, to confront this emergency, we need a fair, fast, funded, and complete fossil fuel phase out. We demand that governments stop fossil fuel expansion and redirect finance towards sustainable, just solutions. In light of this, there must be an end to fossil fuel subsidies and growing military budgets, and instead these funds should be directed to addressing a just transition. The funds are there, but they're going towards death, not to life. Funds need to go to supporting what we see as a justice-based, community-led programs and not towards more extraction. And we have to remember here that we have learned this week that there are over 1,700 lobbyists from the fossil fuel industry. What are they doing here? The polluters should not be here. The communities leading solutions should be here, not those causing the harm. On top of this, financial institutions have funneled $6.9 trillion into fossil fuels since the Paris Agreement. These numbers are fully unacceptable. They are contradictory to a livable future and an affront to the very goals we are here to achieve. We must end these investments immediately. WECAN serves on the steering committee for the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is a global initiative calling for the managed phase out of fossil fuels and acceleration of a just transition. So we are calling on governments to endorse the treaty and begin its implementation now. This is not merely a policy shift, it's a moral imperative. We have got to talk about the source of the climate crisis, coal, oil, and gas. An equitable phase-out ensures that vulnerable and affected communities receive the support and investment they need to transition to a clean, renewable future. A just transition honors workers, frontline communities, and Indigenous peoples by protecting livelihoods, respecting human rights, and ensuring no one is left behind. Secondly, let us be unequivocal. Carbon capture and storage, geoengineering, nuclear, carbon offsets, carbon credits, biodiversity credits, and other market-based schemes are false solutions that perpetuate climate injustice. These schemes allow polluters to continue business as usual, all while denying the real action we so urgently need. They are loopholes for major polluters to greenwash their image without changing their extractive practices. Instead of temporary fixes that benefit the few, we need to demand that these resources go to community-led solutions. Next, we are not calling for charity. We are demanding justice. Climate finance must prioritize those who are leading the change: women, gender diverse people, Indigenous peoples, Black and Brown and frontline communities. At COP29, we call on governments to reach a new collective quantified goal for climate finance that is bold, just, and accessible. And we need accountability. These funds must be free from bureaucratic barriers that prevent the most impacted communities from accessing them. Instead, funds must support generative, local, and culturally relevant climate solutions that strengthen communities' resilience and autonomy. And they must not be in the form of loans that perpetuate a vicious cycle of debt. These are reparations. This is what must be done. Next, we cannot achieve true climate justice without embedding a feminist perspective into every policy and every dollar spent. Feminist economic frameworks challenge us to center care work, community resilience, and the protection of natural ecosystems as the foundation of our economy, not afterwards, but as the foundation. A feminist approach recognizes that women, especially Indigenous, Black, and Brown women, are disproportionately impacted by climate change, but are leaders of solutions. We need to finance women's climate leadership as a core strategy to secure a resilient and equitable future for all. I also want to mention that we women are asked again and again and again to provide data that demonstrates that women are an essential solution to the climate crisis. And we have provided that data and proven ourselves again and again and again. And yet, when is enough? Where is our seat at every table? And where are the resources? We will be on a dead planet if we continue at this oppressive pace. Women and Indigenous peoples who are the solutions need funder and proper positioning now. We are here to demand that governments and financial institutions recognize and adhere to Indigenous rights and sovereignty. Indigenous peoples have safeguarded ecosystems for generations. Governments must uphold free, prior, and informed consent as enshrined in international law and respect Indigenous sovereignty in all environmental decision-making. Particularly Indigenous women and stewards are indispensable to real solutions, and they must be at the center of global climate strategy. Next, we are here to demand that governments recognize the rights of nature. Our ecosystems and biodiversity have inherent rights to exist and thrive and regenerate. This is not just about protecting, but about reciprocity, recognizing that our well-being is inseparable from the health of our Mother Earth herself. We are calling for systemic transformation and nationally determined contributions, the NDCs, and beyond. Incremental adjustments to current policies will not secure a livable future. We need NDCs that are ambitious, comprehensive, and rooted in justice. We demand governments take unprecedented steps in setting new climate finance goals, ones that match the scale of the crisis and genuinely support the most impacted communities. True leadership in this area means forging paths towards equity, dignity, and justice. It means choosing people over profit, long-term resilience over short-term gain, and life over destruction. As countries prepare to submit their NDCs, the Women's Earth and Climate Action is releasing I'm going to show it here. A set of recommendations and guidance to support countries in strengthening their climate commitments by explicitly integrating climate justice principles. This is what the NDC should look like. This policy brief, climate justice recommendations for nationally determined contributions, guidance for a healthy and equitable future for people and planet, details critical areas for improvement needed across the NDCs, including catalyzing women's leadership, upholding Indigenous rights, centering biodiversity, phasing out fossil fuels, and advancing a just transition. The recommendations aim to ensure that countries adopt ambitious and sustainable solutions rather than continuing business as usual or relying on proven harmful and effective false solutions. And we'd also like to bring up this push for nuclear that is going on here at the COP. This has to stop. As we make this demand, we also know that it's essential to make clear what are false solutions, including dangerous or unproven techno fixes, carbon offset schemes that don't work, net zero pledges that delay immediate action, amongst others. WECAN is also releasing a policy analysis, the need for real zero, not net zero, shifting from false solutions to real solutions, and a just transition that details these vital issues. Let's be clear. The window to act is closing. We have a narrow path to 1.5 degrees, a path that will only widen if we are courageous enough to take it. Now is the moment to rise to the occasion, to lead with urgency, respect, and resolve that this crisis demands. We women are leading the way. We can act now, and we must act now, no matter what governments have to say. We have to navigate and have our own negotiations and our own path forward. Thank you. And now I hand the floor to Zukiswa White.
Hello? Hi.
You have a timekeeper, I think.
Thank you so much. Hope everyone is well. Osprey, thank you so much for those incredible opening remarks. As always, I'm very honored and excited to be in community with WECAN and its incredible, network of women and feminist leaders doing the work to address a world in crisis. So I want to begin my intervention with noting that we are still needing to amplify the role of women and the role of Indigenous climate leaders, as if we do not know who not only responds first in the context of crisis, but who also is so often the one that are either nurturing and or building alternatives to avoid crisis altogether, or who is preparing for crisis and ensuring that we know what to do when that crisis comes. And so as much as we are sitting here, we have shown up for this event that is titled around, women as leaders, we also need to question, why is it that women's organization, on top of the work that we are doing, right, to contribute to keeping the dream of 1.5 alive, we still need to be convincing the world that we are doing that work. And so these events are important precisely because there is that need, but I want us to really think about how unacceptable it is that in 2024, as urgent as the crisis we are facing is, and as and as much as we have done as feminists, as women advocates, as gender advocates, to really disrupt narratives around women's leadership, women's capabilities, we are still needing to gather in a room to speak about women leading the front lines of climate crisis, even though we know exactly who responds first, we know exactly who prepares and who nurtures, etc. And so oftentimes we are still in rooms where we are speaking about how women are impacted differently, or how the climate crisis is gendered. And even as we are spoken of as vulnerable, as numbers, we are not numbers, we are not statistics, right? In our majority, we are the people that are actually ensuring that the numbers that could be so far worse are not as worse as they can get, even as we are denied so much of the infrastructure and the support that can allow this work to even be more meaningful. So let's have that in mind. We shouldn't be in conversations like this, but we will continue to be as long as women are not taken seriously as the social and political actors that we are in terms of any crisis and any socioeconomic issue, but especially the one that brings us to Baku for the past 2 weeks. So this cannot continue to be a state of affairs we continue to accept, and it is important that more of us do the work that organizations like WECAN is doing, and coalitions like the one that I'm from, the Women and Gender Constituency, of assuming women's leadership, right? Not negotiating women's leadership, assuming women's leadership, because we know that women are leading, assuming Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities agency, and not negotiating that agency and that right to self-determination is something that we are still negotiating. And that assumption is important because it disrupts thinking and framing around how we not only engage in spaces like this, but also how we frame and think about our movements to deliver us the justice we so need. And so, because narratives are important, for me, how we speak about those of us who are rendered at the margins, we're not marginalized, we are rendered marginalized, right? Because the work to deliver the world from engaging, from the work to deliver the world from ongoing human-made suffering and exploitation is urgent, and every day we lose moves us further and further away from keeping 1.5 alive. So I want to insist that our advocacy does matter. And if that's my only contribution in this space, is that our advocacy does matter. Movements from across time do turn the wheel of justice. I think those who benefit from the world's destruction, from the destruction of the environment, want to keep us believing that this advocacy not only doesn't matter, but this advocacy is impossible. That's not true. Of course, those who are benefiting from the destruction of the world, of course, those that are benefiting from the unequal power relations will want to continue to capture our imaginations. And that is what capitalism has been very successful in doing, capturing the imagination of the world to believe that we cannot live in a different way than what we are living now. Noting that there's some Indigenous communities who have outlived capitalism, despite the fact that there has an infrastructure that has been built over time to secure their erasure, but they've survived that. Capitalism is not as old of an institution as we think it is, but capitalists, the imperial core, wants us to forget that, wants us to think that when we say that we are insisting and demanding a fossil fuel phase out, they tell us how it is not going to be possible to live without to live without harming the environment. That's simply not true. It is just against their interests of ongoing accumulation and exploitation to do the work needed to ensure that we can safely and efficiently transition, right? So the capturing of our imaginations and pushing us further and further away from decision making, pushing us further and further away from having an influence over how we live and how we want to continue to live is in their interest. But it's not true that our demands for feminist climate justice, our demands for Indigenous people's sovereignty, our demands for care work to be centered, etc., are not possible. The ones whose interests we are currently serving are wanting us to, our work is directly in conflict with theirs. I have 1 minute, no time left. All right, so I will skip these pages and quick conclude by saying, ultimately, The systems and the powers that be depend on us losing hope. They depend on capturing our imagination. They depend on their propaganda winning. And so it is always good to remember that sorry, I can't summarize all of this, so I will just say that women have been leading, women are leading, women will continue to lead, and women will continue to insist on not having our imaginations taken from us and captured by those whose interests are being served often in the negotiation rooms. Our presence here matters, our advocacy here and outside of here matters, and another world is not only possible, but we have seen historically how even large institutions that were once thought are unsurmountable have been taken down, and there's no reason for the climate crisis to not be part of a history of systems of oppression and exploitation that have been brought down by the people, with women, of course, at the front. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zukiswa. And one of the reasons we're holding this event is because when we come to these COP spaces, we have to create our own space to be resistance. That's what we're doing here. We are creating a different voice and a different resistance. And this is absolutely essential because we don't believe in this process, but we need to be here. We don't want to be here. We are forced to be here so that we can stand up for our communities. But while we're here, don't drink the Kool-Aid. And now I'm going to hand the floor over to Majo Andrade Cerda, who is a Quechua woman from Ecuador. Please, you have the floor.
Yeah, can you hear me? Okay, my name is Majo Andrade Cerda. I'm from the Quechua people of Terena. Now I'm part of the Council of Camp-Horinek, which is the main national organization for indigenous peoples in the Ecuadorian Amazon. This means a lot to me because my elders are recognizing the work the younger generation is doing right now. And what's the job I'm doing? It's just bridging this path for them to understand this complex world that we are facing now, mainly on these topics, climate change. For us, for example, in my community, they didn't know, my elders didn't know what is climate change, like in this such a term. So we were working really hard to let them understand what it is. And they say, you have to do this because you are our voice. We have invested in you because they sent me to another city to study this colonial language. So you should do this. And not it's just in my community, they are recognizing this role of indigenous young women, but also in the entire Ecuadorian Amazon. And I can say it also in the entire Amazon basin, because it's necessary that women as me, who are forced to go, not just to be in these spaces, but we are forced to be in cities. We are forced to go out from our communities just because we don't have enough education, health services, and even electricity. So we have to do this not just because it's a matter of selection, because we realize climate change is gonna kill us, it's because it's already killing us. So we have to do this job, no matter what happens, no matter if we are women, if we are young, if we are from indigenous peoples, we have to do this. Because in our communities, we are facing a lot of struggles. We are facing criminalization. They are literally killing us. Latin America is the most dangerous continent to be a defender. And we are defenders not because it's our election, it's because we have to do this. And in this sense, I was thinking a few years ago how I can connect the work that I'm doing back in my territory. How can I connect to international spaces? Because I was seeing that in international spaces, other people were talking about the climate solutions, these false solutions. But I was thinking, no, it's not just like that. And now that I'm in with my entire team, I can probably say that I have a people from indigenous territories. We are working on promote our ancestral knowledge to climate solutions. And we are young. We are all the youth from the entire Amazon in Ecuador that we are working on this because this matters to us. And it's not just because climate change, it's a high topic, a hot topic in international spaces or local spaces, is because we are seeing our future. What is going to happen if we are not here anymore? Our rivers, our sacred mountains are going to be destroyed. And it's destroying our way of life, since we don't have any guarantee that states are going to keep our ancestral lands. We have to do this. We have to educate ourselves in this non-indigenous system, but it's because we want to do this too, to create a bridge between our knowledge, our ancestral knowledge, and this science, that we had to prove to science that our knowledge is valued. And in these spaces, we are seeing a lot of reports, a lot of climate reports from the IPCC, from other entities, but they are not including indigenous knowledge because we have to prove them that it's valued. We have to create such a new narrative for that. And that's why we are doing, we are bringing these solutions that we are doing in our lands to keep a focus on everything we do matters. Everything we do support this movement that we are fighting for climate change, against climate change. And it's hard because sometimes for us, it's not our first language to speak here in big events in English. And the space is really colonialist, and we have to defeat that. First in our minds, because if we are thinking we can change this just at COPs, just at international spaces, I think we are not doing the right thing. First, we have to go locally with our communities, with indigenous women. We are in the front lines, and we are changing all this bad structure that we need to create new opportunities for us. So we are trying to promote, and actually Brazil is gonna host next COP, right? Brazil is the second country in the world with a higher population of indigenous peoples. Are we going to listen to us? I don't know. It's a matter of the states deciding on which voices they are listening. Osprey already said there is a big lobby of polluters, and indigenous peoples are not in the front lines here in these negotiations. We have to change this. And how we can promote that? First, include the indigenous people's voices back in your countries, locally, because otherwise we are not going to change anything. And second, I think it's really important to keep in mind that all biomas, all the territories from indigenous peoples matter. If we don't protect any bioma, for example, in my case, if you don't help to protect the Amazon, we are not going to have a planet later. So we need to create a mechanism for the protection of all the territories of indigenous peoples, and mainly to secure the lives of indigenous women, of indigenous youth and children who are there in the territories, hoping that they cannot go out just because they need to migrate because of climate change, or because they don't have any more opportunities. We have the solutions as indigenous peoples, so we have to create this bridge. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. And you reminded me that a few days ago, we had a press conference with Indigenous leaders from Amiga, from Brazil. And one of the messages that they carried is, when we go to Brazil, yes, we want to care for the forest, but they kept saying, we need you to come because we need to reforest our minds. And that really hit my heart, how much we need to transform what we're thinking about and how we're viewing this moment. So thank you for your comments and your work in your community. And I wanted to acknowledge that we have a baby in the back of the room, and that sweet little song is why we're here. Probably the most important person at the COP is in the back of the room. So now I would like to hand the floor over to my dear colleague, Eriel Deranger. She is Executive Director of Indigenous Climate Action. Thank you, Eriel.
My microphone does not come close, so I'm going to be doing this. Iklanete denesotlaneta Eriel Tseekwe Hushe, Deranger Betsi Ani Hasli. My name is Eriel Tseekwe Deranger, and I'm a member of the Athabasca Chipewyan First Nation, which is located in the Treaty 8 territories of Northern Alberta in so-called Canada. My community is a Dene or Dene Slotlane community, and we exist in a UNESCO World Heritage Site known as the Wood Buffalo National Park. This is part of the Peace Athabasca Delta, one of the last inland freshwater deltas in the world. And that park and that ecosystem is currently under threat because of ongoing expansion of the Alberta tar sands. Despite the fact that there is growing consensus globally that we are in a climate crisis and we need to be reducing our GHG emissions and phasing out of things like fossil fuels, in the last few years, we have seen a concerted effort to increase approvals in the Alberta tar sands. In fact, last year, there was an 8% increase of approvals in my region. I think it's important to understand that as my previous speaker stated, that these places are not just simply lands and territories and places for resources. These are critical parts of our identity and who we are. It is inseparable from our identities. The word dene, when broken down into its root form, means to flow from the land. We refer to our lands and territories as denende, essentially meaning the places in which we flow from. Our name, our traditional name, which was taken from us, was actually the Kaitale Dene Sotlene, which means the people of the willow and the people of the land. However, we were imposed with colonial names and institutions were forced upon our communities to make way for them to create the structures that have proliferated this planet and created the climate crisis. I come from a community that is not just impacted by oil and gas, but other resource extractions, including mega hydro, uranium mining, and mineral mining, mainly in the way of diamonds. My community has seen the impacts of capitalism. The systems of colonialism have taken over our communities where they try to strip our nations of our languages, our cultures, our ways of life, and remove us from our lands and territories. Colonialism is not something that happened. It is an ongoing process. Some people have used the term neo-colonialism, but that would infer that it stopped at one point and is something new. Colonialism has never stopped. The relationships between the colonial projects have created a project where they just cut and paste their strategies. From in Canada for the imposition of the residential schools was cut and paste into Australia, into the United States, into New Zealand, where they attempted to take all sorts of processes to suppress and oppress our people. And part of that oppression and subjugation was also the ways to take the voices of the women away. I come from a matriarchal community. My community was one that was driven by the strength of our women. However, colonization tried to replace that with systems of chief and council systems where the men were the leaders. I have a very funny story to tell where I was just recently at the annual general meeting for my nation. I know it's a colonial process, but basically the meeting where our leaders reported back on their activities. And the chief of my nation, Chief Alan Adam, decided to honor me for the work that I've done on climate and to bring awareness of my community. And I was very happy, but he actually shared a funny story. He said, when I was elected at chief, I thought I was going to cash in on the economy of the Alberta tar sands. I was running on a platform to make money off of the oil and gas system. However, this one made a problem for me. She was out there climbing buildings and climbing up flagpoles and dropping banners, which I was. And I was calling out this system. And I had to call her up and say, you're causing problems for me. And she didn't back down. She said, no, you can't continue to cash in on the tar sands. Our people are dying. And I had to smarten up because we have to listen to our women. It's critical that we understand that Indigenous peoples, in my experience, is not unique. Indigenous peoples represent 5% of the global population, or approximately 5 million people worldwide in over 90 different countries. However, we also represent 15% of the global poor people living in poverty. This is not by accident. We have been structurally excluded from systems of economic development, energy systems, and governance, where our lifeways, cultures, and knowledge have been deemed invaluable and sometimes even demonized to the point that we were vilified in many governance systems. However, there is growing evidence that Indigenous peoples are critical to sustaining life on this planet. However, even in the meetings here at COP, despite the fact that our knowledge is recognized, despite the fact that they are now starting to talk about things like nature-based solutions and the need to recognize Mother Earth and the services of the land, we are still tokenized and sidelined. We do not have a voice in the decision-making processes, and it's time that we stop asking for permission and start advancing our sovereignty and self-determination. The world's biodiversity is in our hands, yet only a small fraction of the actual legal rights to our lands and territories has been formally recognized. We need to move towards a system of land back. And why is this critical in the climate movement? Because our lands and territories contain billions of metric tons of carbon that is necessary to sequester the lands and the GHG emissions on this planet. We also have to understand that it's not just these beautiful forest systems, that it's also places like where I come from, which is the Arctic. Thank you. I will keep in time this time. Like the Arctic, where we have peatlands and peat bogs. And that we have to understand that our soils and the sacred sites of many Indigenous peoples, from deserts to grasslands to peatlands to the Arctic, that our lands are just as important as the beautiful forests of the Amazonian rainforests. This is why, as a global community, we need to work together. This is why we need to be restoring our relationships with the land, restoring our matriarchal lines of decision-making and governance in our communities to ensure that we are not just protecting the planet, but we are protecting future generations. I want to have a shout out to Murawa in the back, who I met many years ago, who came to my community before she had any babies. She got to witness the destruction in my territory. And a few years later, I traveled to Australia to visit the Australian Indigenous communities to see the destruction in theirs. These stories and sharing our knowledge and our strengths together is what is necessary for us to combat the climate crisis, where we need to be demanding that all climate finance mechanisms have direct access to all of our people, not just in developing nations where we absolutely need to be paying. Developed nations need to pay up for their dues and the damages, but we also need to ensure that all those that have been at the front lines of the climate crisis, that are experiencing the most adverse impacts of the climate crisis, have direct access. We need to stop state intermediaries and colonial powers and systems of patriarchy from subjugating and oppressing the women who have the solutions to the climate crisis. Thank you. Masicho.
Thank you so much. Okay, it's working. Thank you. Thank you so much, Eriel, for your incredible work. And I just wanted to say, I'm really glad you got acknowledged. You're an amazing leader. So congratulations. And now I have the honor of introducing Gie Bastista, who is the co-founder and executive director of Re-Earth Initiative. Thank you, Gie.
Thank you so much, Osprey. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I want to start by sharing a little bit of my story with you. This is my 5th COP, and whenever I started going to COPs and people would say, this is my 15th COP, this is my 20th COP, I would think, why would they keep coming if it's gone for so long? And now I'm becoming one of those people. And like Osprey said, we're here because we're holding the line. And this is exactly the question that a journalist asked me when I was 17 years old at my first COP. She said, why do you think that your voices will make any difference if we've gone 25 years without anything substantial happening? And now reflecting back on that question, I think the answer is if we had been heard from the beginning, we would not be in a situation where 1.5 degrees of warming is seen as a win. Because 1.5 degrees of warming is detrimental. And we are seeing it as our best hope. If our voices had been included from the beginning, I wouldn't have to think about my grandkids in the year 2100, when all the climate models go towards, about what life is like when we are 3 degrees warmer. These are the things that happen when our voices are missing, when the voices of the people who know how to love the land, how to take care of the land are missing. Because the climate movement shouldn't be about the carbon in the sky. It should be about the carbon in the soil. It should be about our earth, our territories, our food systems. That is what it's really about going back to the land. We are told this fairy tale of innovation and what's next. I think the real thing that's next is us remembering where our bodies come from, where our bodies go back to. Every single system in the earth is circular. A tree grows and it goes back for the next tree to be born from. Everything goes back to the earth. And what are we doing? Extracting and disposing, using 1.8 Earths to sustain not only our extraction, but also waste. There is a website that shows you the amount of biomass that we have taken from the earth. This year, we have taken 78 billion tons of biomass from the earth. And there's an average of 90 billion tons of biomass, including fossil fuels, minerals, and others taken from the earth. Every single second, our earth is being taken from. And that breaks my heart, and it should break all of our hearts, that we have fallen into a system that is making that the norm. On my way here, I was thinking, what should I talk about? And this woman stopped me, and she said, we have to talk about the NCQG. So if that is not creator telling us what to talk about, I don't know what is. The NCQG, first of all, let me say, those acronyms, those are so on purpose so that we don't know what we are talking about. The NCQG means how much money are we giving to save the planet, in translation. And that's part of our job, to translate the things that they agree on negotiations that are clusters of words that mean nothing, but for us, they can mean everything. What do we want from the NCQG? We want public finance. Why? Because public finance is traceable. Public finance is transparent. If we get all these private loans, we won't know where the money comes from or where it's going. We want loans. I mean, we don't want loans. Oh my God, I've said loans so many times. We don't want loans. We want grants. Why? Because loans put countries, especially in the global south, in an endless cycle of debt. And what does debt tie to? Extraction. Because how can the global south pay back debt? By going into neoliberalist economic systems that keep extracting oil, minerals, timber to pay back these high interest loans from things like the World Bank and the IMF. That is the real reason why we don't want loans. They're putting our countries into cycles of eternal extraction to pay them back. And we're locking in dozens of years of those type of extractivist practices that our countries have had to do in order to stay in the economic system, in order to stay afloat. The next thing is, why are we asking for $1.3 trillion? We're asking for $1.3 trillion because the 100 billion, it was basically nothing. The 100 billion is nothing compared to the global GDP. The global GDP in 2022 was around $100 trillion. And the fact that we're asking 1% of the global economy for climate is disrespectful. It's laughable, actually, because that economy was built off of our land. That economy was built because of our people, because of the stewardship of indigenous communities. So $1.3 trillion is only about 1% of the global economy, but it's also the bare minimum of what we need if we want to tackle the climate crisis. What are we also asking for? For loss and damage to be included because our communities are already seeing the loss and damage to our territories. It actually means that is one of the clear words that they have actually. It is loss and damage of our lands, of our people, of our homes. The fossil fuel industry today receives $7 trillion of subsidies every year. We're giving $7 trillion to extraction of fossil fuels and about hoping for $1 trillion for solutions. The scales are not adding up. And this is the future that is being negotiated, our future. We're actually shown with money what matters to them. And I think it's time that we get together, and it's been time and time again. Yesterday, Tom Goldtooth said that this was his 26th COP. And that is when I'm reminded of the resilience of our elders, the resilience that they have to show up time and time again in this lifetime and in the one before, and the lifetimes of our ancestors of showing up again and again to fight for what matters, to love harder than any other love in this world, which is the belief in humanity that we will step up. And to finalize, I just want to, I don't know if you've seen the pictures of when the Paris Agreement was agreed upon. Everybody was celebrating. If you look up the pictures, everybody's holding hands and they're so, so happy. That was 9 years ago, right? The Paris Agreement was a milestone. It was ambitious. And what are countries doing today? They're reading out all of the red lines, what they will not accept in negotiations. They're reading out all of the reasons why they don't want to agree on basically any text. We're seeing just transition thrown over there, mitigation work program thrown over there, gender, language is almost completely gone to something that will change our lives meaningfully. And countries don't even have to follow these agreements, right? They're recommendations. They don't even want to be ambitious enough to be recommended to do something well. That is the issue, that we're not even being courageous enough to be ambitious so that countries will step up. And that is why we're going to go back to our countries. We're going to go back to the nationally determined contributions, see this space as a platform to show how civil society is coming together to keep pushing governments, and we will keep on doing so. But we have to go back to our lands. We have to go back to solutions. I just wanted to add one more thing, and I know I'm at time. The climate movement, the indigenous land movement, all of these movements have always been, if you imagine them, have been about confrontation. They have been about how loud we can scream and how many people we can gather in the streets. And that also takes a lot from us. And if we want a world that is joyous, we need to do our activism in a joyous way, which is why I'm grateful for these spaces. And I want to call on everybody that our activism looks exactly like we want the future to look like. We need to be cooperative, collaborative, trust each other, because we will get to the other side of justice. We will get there, because I see that we are intergenerationally doing this. I see that I will not give up because I'm thinking of that future of those children that will step on this land as well. So let's do this. Thank you. We're gonna switch because if I get this, I'm fine.
Hey now, Danny. 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 Hey now, hey now, Danny. Hey now, hey now, Danny. Hey now, Danny. Hey now, hey now, Danny. Hey now, we are. That song says simply, my mother, you're good. It speaks to the sacred waters. It speaks to the water in you and the water in me. It speaks to those things that understand what the natural law is, and that's why we're really here. We are the children of Mother Earth. And as her children, it's time for us to come back into balance and behave ourselves as a species. I want to give great thanks to the men who are here. You have carried an undue burden throughout your lifetime. You have been expected to carry everything on your shoulders and to make all the decisions. But you've had good mothers, and that's why you're here today. And we as women, in this particular instant in the history of humankind, are now stepping back into the natural role of balance and assuming the power that has always been called to us to assume by the Earth Mother. Anger is part of that. Impatience is part of that. Demanding that things be set right is part of that. Saying out loud that as I watched this baby, when the mother covered herself and allowed the baby to nurse from her breast, that we have been nursing from the breast of our mother, the earth, in an unkind way as a species. We as a species have looked at our mother and have ripped from her belly the sacred oil and gas that is part of her living body. We who are here to honor the ancestors of the Azerbaijani and those that came way, way, way before them, we thank you. That song is for you as well. We thank you, sacred air, for breathing with us and sharing the breath that we are with each other, just as the trees and the corn and the flowers and all living things share breath for breath with all of us things that are called life, that are called humans. We must understand very clearly that the deer still walk their path and they understand the natural law, and they have an inherent responsibility to their progeny, to their children, to their generations to come, and they follow that natural law in that manner. That the birds understand natural law. That the wind and the hurricanes and the tornadoes and the fire and the thunderstorms understand natural law and they're following that. What species on the face of our mother, the earth, does not follow natural law? Well, let's teach them. Let's move into those spaces that are open to women to assume the power that is naturally theirs. The Moon Mother does not wait for the rhythms to be established by the Father Son because she knows her power. She knows what it is that she's supposed to do in terms of helping the ocean, the Mother Ocean, to be able to live the natural life that she has and to bring the powers of those that live within her and upon her and are dependent. The thunderstorms know the same. Women have the understanding because we lived in the villages originally. That's where our DNA comes from. That's where our understanding, that's where this deep feeling that brings us here today to share this moment comes from. In the beginning, when we lived in those villages and we knew each other intimately, we understood what was necessary for the village. Is someone planting the corn? Is someone making sure that the water is cared for? Is someone making sure that we're not overhunting here? Our men folks knew that, brought those knowledges to us. And we shared the responsibility, and we lived in a balance that was male and female, that was fire and water, that was earth and sky, and it's still here. It simply needs for us to align human law with natural law. And that's what we are doing in these halls. I am so over this, I'll tell you that. This place right here is like the Handmaiden Tale. I mean, it's like just been a bit too much for me. I think it's time. I'd like to step out in the streets right now and, you know, or walk into halls and raise our voices. I don't know why when people say, shh, everybody says, yeah, because Mother Earth is saying, no, get loud, get strong. Assume the power that is already there and be part of it. Don't step back from it. So who is the leader here? You are the leader. What is the power here? The power is the sacred fire that lives underneath the city of fire, this place where oil and gas was first discovered. Who are the leaders that allow those people to sit in those halls and make those decisions? Those are us. So as long as those things are allowed, as long as we believe that a piece of paper with signatures on it define how we live our lives, then we're complicit with this system. So our job, in my understanding, is to warrior up in our own homes, establish that balance, grow our own food, honor the natural life, and honor ourselves as nature protecting itself.
I'd just like to say again, this is Casey Camp-Horinek from the Ponca Nation. She's also the chair of the Indigenous Council for the Global Alliance for Rights of Nature. And we're honored to have on our WECAN board. Thank you so much for your powerful words and prayer and song. We'd like to move into, we discussed this, my team and I this morning. This is not a WECAN commercial, but we are going to show WECAN video. And the reason I want to do it, we weren't planning to, is because we have been hearing so much around carbon offsets and around carbon mechanism, carbon market schemes. And we just came from the UN Convention on Biological Diversity in Colombia. And this insistence about how forests are to be treated. And it's not just about forests, but we're going to, you know, be discussing in this video around forests, is that we want to show one of our projects that is directly funding people on the ground. We're not a foundation, but we have our own program where we are working with women on the ground in community with them to reforest their land. And we have been working with Nima Namadamu, who is our coordinator in the Otombe region in Eastern Congo, DR Congo. And we've been planting with her for a decade. And we have planted, sorry, Amy. Sorry. We have been planting there for a decade. And I want to also we'll show the video in a second. It's very short. But what I want to say, this is women-led. There are 1,000 women reforesting. It is not through government money. It is not part of any offset scheme. It is women healing the land. It is women planting the trees. It is women getting funded. It is women healing their communities. 25% of the trees are going for human use use, 75% of the trees are reforesting damaged lands because of colonization and patriarchy and capitalism. And it's really beautiful to see that we have our own ways of doing things that are through direct funding that are not reliant on capitalism. And that's why I wanted to show this film, to show these women and to show a different way forward that is on this with these small organizations. This is one project. We could do this all over the world with the trillions that belong to us. So let's go ahead and show the video. Thank you.
Yeah, stop the wars.
Could we get some volume on that? Maybe start it from the beginning with some volume. Thank you. And while they're fixing the technology, we are also doing a project in Ecuador and Brazil based on these same methodologies.
Forest was here. And when
Can you start
I
from the
was
beginning?
here, I
Thanks.
see no more trees. Idea was
Thank you. Appreciate it.
when I come back here after 25 years, I was shocked. When I was a little girl, the forest was here. And when I was here, I see no more trees. Idea was how again people can bring life back.
As the climate crisis increases, scientists are telling us that one of the most important things that we can do is to protect forests and biodiversity. The Congo Basin is one of the largest and most important forests of the world, only second to the Amazon in terms of size. And there we are reforesting damaged lands, lands that due to extractive industries, agricultural business, have been completely turned into deserts.
We have now 500 women. We are planting those trees. And when you planting trees, you are honor those trees and you are honor on the land. That is not usual on our culture, women to have some propriety, some ownership. That gives us really confidence.
ibi byose ni jewe biteye kandi ni jewe uzubibagarira iri ni ishyamba ryanje
75% of the trees are going to rewilding the forest. Some of them now are 20 feet tall, and we're quickly seeing the forest begin to regenerate. And 25% are for human use so that we can ensure that we're protecting the 1.6 million acres of old growth forest. This is where their food comes from, where their medicines come from, where the things they need for their homes come from, their pharmacy.
ibiti akamaro ko kubitera icyo bimarira n'icyo mbitegeyemo cyane ni ukugira ngo tuzongere tubone imvura muri iki gihugu cyacu ibiti byarashize turifuza yuko bino biti bwa WECAN zokomeza tukongera tukagarura amashamba.
Women, they are now protecting environment with trees. Women of Itombwe forest, natural forest from DRC, we are trying to protect our environment.
We're now protecting 1.6 million acres of old growth forest over the years as we reforest in the Congo Basin.
kuko byambariye njewe ku giti cyanje bimpesha ihewa nziza muri iki gihugu cyacu.
During the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a real need to develop more food sovereignty and food security. So now not only in the nurseries that we have are we planting sapling trees, but also lots of food for the local communities.
Vegetables we did really help so much. People to have vegetables to fight with malnutrition.
And the women are just so proud to not only be planting trees and healing their damaged homelands, but also protecting this old growth forest for all of us for doing their part in mitigating the climate crisis. So for all of these things, it's a very comprehensive project that's lifting up women, lifting up Indigenous peoples and their traditional ways of life, protecting old growth forest and reforesting damaged lands.
All of these forests will become soon big one, and we want to really to have again bring new oxygen. Winds will be stopping winds, and it's really very, very, very important. Trees, they are life.
So yeah, I just wanted to share that because there are thousands and thousands of these projects that are women-led all over the world. And we are told that these are not solutions because they are too small. I don't think 1.6 million acres is small. And I also know that when you add up all of these solutions that are women-led and are done from a climate justice framework, it adds up to a huge solution. And this is something that corporates don't want us to talk about, or governments. They want all these top-down solutions that they can control. They want to have all of the money controlled. They want to have the institutionalization of it controlled, and they want the money. And the fact is, if we look at a feminist economy approach, a degrowth model, beyond growth model, community-led solutions, it's really close to the ground. And it is a solution when you add it up. Indigenous solutions, women-led solutions. And that's where the power and the money needs to go. And that's what we're demanding. So I just wanted to show that one example. And I know many people have others. And we have a little bit of time for Q&A, and I wanted to open it up to the audience to have some time to address any of the speakers or make some comments. So we're going to go ahead and do that, and we'll take a question right there. Thank you.
Hello. Hi, my name is Paige Stevens. I'm a student delegate from Indiana University, and I have a question for our panelists from Ecuador. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. So you talked about COP30 being held in Belém next year, which is the first COP to be held in the Amazon. So my question is, what kind of involvement do you expect to see from Indigenous people and Indigenous activists in Brazil at the COP? What hopes, expectations, and criticisms do you have for Brazil 1 year out from their time as host? Thank you.
First, I think it's very necessary to ask about if it's the capacity for hosting all the people who are coming to COP in Belém. Belém is one of the main cities in the Amazon in Brazil, but still we don't want to be like included, just like it happened in Cali, included like folklorizing us as Indigenous peoples. But Eriel already said we need inclusion. We need to be in the process of decision making processes. And actually, I'm hearing that the COP presidency it's going to maybe be shared with an Indigenous delegate. We don't know yet, but it doesn't mean it's already representing all Indigenous peoples and mainly Indigenous women. They are gonna have to do a lot to include in all the stages processes, and it's not just only at the end of COP. Remember, this entire process of the UNFCCC gathers a lot of meetings, technical meetings, and Indigenous peoples cannot be found in those meetings. We need funding to follow up what the states are saying in these spaces, because they are not including Indigenous rights and they are not including Indigenous knowledge. So we need also to create this mechanism to guarantee that Indigenous peoples are going to be there. Other thing that I'm also thinking, it's we are looking for real inclusion, even for the language. We are trying to prepare a toolkit as Indigenous peoples, but it should not be our duty. It should be the secretariat duty, because we need to speak the same language. And in Brazil, we are going to face a lot of struggles because people, even here, they don't speak English. So in Brazil, we are going to have also Portuguese to communicate with people from there. So it's not just a matter of how we are gonna see their indigenous peoples more inclusion. I think we are gonna have a delegation of more than 500 indigenous peoples there. We are expecting to do so because Brazil is very big. It's wide. It's not just the Amazon. We have other biomes, but still, indigenous peoples from the entire world. We are 7 sociocultural regions, and we need to be represented there, but not just at the end. Like I said, it's an entire path. We need funds for that too.
Other questions, please?
My question is for, I'm sorry, I might say your name wrong, Kazuki. Yeah, this. Yeah, okay, sorry. First of all, I want to say really thank you for being here. I'm 18 and it's really an inspiration to see you here. And my question is, what gives you the idea to create your foundation, and how did you do it? Thank you.
Well, welcome, and I can put this here. So my nonprofit, which now also funds youth across the world in 27 countries, started because the youth movement for me and for many youth from the global south was seen as only a type of environmentalism that was all around the topics of striking and going out, but in our countries we couldn't strike safely, or it was risky. In the global south, being an activist is really difficult. It's putting your life on the line, and many earth defenders, that's what they do every single day. And we have to remind ourselves that we defend the land because there is something to be defended from, right? There's these extractivist industries. They are the reason why we need defenders at all. But to answer your question, my organization, I founded it with youth from across the world to be an alternative space for youth from the global south to be heard in these spaces. Last year, we brought 12 people from all different countries to COP. And this year, we only brought 2 people because we're getting ready for Brazil. We think it's going to be a really important COP because it's going to bridge biodiversity with climate. And we believe in small-scale funding. We think that $5,000, $10,000 can go a really long way in a local community. And I know that because it's true for my community. And these big foundations, they don't have the time to look to applications that are $10,000, $5,000. They just don't. They rather give bigger grants to more institutionalized foundations or organizations. So what we want to do is bridge that gap. We want to make sure that the money makes it to the ground, what we're asking in these spaces. Last year, we funded 46 different organizations and youth activists in the global south and in frontline communities across the world. And this year we funded something called the Anti-COP. And the Anti-COP was in Oaxaca. And the purpose of the Anti-COP was for people, especially from territorial movements, that they have lost hope in spaces like this COP. And the main purpose of it is to join territorial defense movements with climate activism. And we believe in alternative spaces. We believe in the fact that we also had 4 thematic tracks on mega projects, on migration, on water, and others. So it's just, that's why we want to support the things, the imagination that is actually materializing the future that we want. So yes, we will participate in spaces like these because we want to know, we want to have incidents, but we also have the right to have our own spaces that are breaking boundaries of what we were told was possible. So you're welcome to join. We have volunteers and also paid positions. So.
And the name of your?
Oh, the name of it is Re-Earth Initiative. Re-Earth Initiative, because we're tired of reuse, reduce, recycle. We need to re-earth, reconnect, redefine, all of that. So Re-Earth Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies. My name's Karina Lester. I'm an Indigenous woman from Australia. I'm an international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons ambassador. So the history of our country is testing. So country wears the scars of atomic bombs that have been tested by the British government, who came out to Australia in the 1950s through to the 1960s. So 2 questions. Does WECAN do work around areas that have been contaminated, and how do we heal those scarred landscapes globally? And my other question is around whether WECAN is doing some amazing projects in Australia, and where will those projects, or where are those projects in Australia, if they are?
Thank you for that question. Yes and yes to both. Yes to the first one, and yes, I would be interested in the second question. We don't have any projects right now in Australia, but I would love to learn more from you about that. So yes, we work to heal damaged lands, and yes, I'd like to learn more from you about that. And this can be something we pass on, but I don't know, Amy, if we could put you on the spot a little bit about how nuclear is being discussed here at the COP. If you want to pass on that. Okay. Because we know it is a very big issue that is happening here at the COP. And so I just didn't want to pass over your comment about that, because as we start looking to move off of fossil fuels, we know that we want to see things move towards real, true regenerative clean energy around sun and wind and what Mother Earth has offered to us. But it also means decreasing overconsumption and the consumption of the global north. It's not a simple answer. This is an ecosystem of approaches we have to look at. And we cannot be continuing the extractive economy, which means as we move to renewables, we don't want to see the same practices of now going to indigenous lands and other lands that are pristine and mining for minerals so that we can energize this clean energy electrification new economy and repeat the old extractive economy. That won't work, and having human rights and indigenous rights violated again, and more depletion to Mother Earth's natural resources. And on top of that, we don't want to see nuclear and the nuclear waste and all of those those old technologies being resuscitated to generate basically business as usual in the continuation of consumption, the continuation of energy at the level that we're seeing. We have to change how we're living. We have to change how we live with Mother Earth, and we have to change how we're living with one another. So I'm trying to give you a short answer, but to say that all of the issues you're presenting are so key. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Amy Goodman from Democracy Now!, and we're covering this the UN COP, as we have for 15 years. And today on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org for everyone globally, we are looking at the amount of energy that's required to run the AI data centers around the world, and how that is being used as a justification for nuclear power and smaller supposed next gen, what they call clean energy, nuclear power around the world. It's very significant. It's a whole strata of under conversation that's going on here at the COP, and Democracy Now! As a news organization is covering those conversations that are happening in countries around the world, reviving nuclear power to supply energy for these AI data centers. In some cases, for example, one massive to fund GP chat requiring the energy needed to power all of Ireland. That's the level of energy that's needed.
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In response to that as well, I really want to say that there are ways to stop this. I know in the 1980s that indigenous lands were targeted as a place for nuclear waste. That's how my brothers and I morphed from being part of the American Indian movement into being those that stopped those types of things. When they were getting ready to put a nuclear plant into the state of Oklahoma, Black Fox nuclear plant directly, we allied with everyone in the territory, including an incredible woman named Carrie, who mortgaged her farm to sponsor this. And civil society sat on that land for months. It was very much like a Standing Rock camp. We had huge concerts there. We refused to leave. Kerr-McGee is who is bringing that there. It is not there. It never arrived there. And we have a choice in this. We have to stop it from happening, and we have to stop it in our own territories. Each one of us is responsible for that. We can't allow it to begin and then find a way to be reactive, proactive now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Osprey, can I comment as well? Nuclear? Sorry.
No.
I
Good.
think that the conversation on nuclear energy is part of the broader conversations on green colonialism and false solutions. And I think it's really, really important. And I think we do have a lot of lessons to learn from the anti-nuclear movement of the 1980s. Even myself, I mentioned that my community was inundated with nuclear or with uranium mining as well. In 1979, just before my birth, Earthside, my family was forcibly removed by armed security for the El Dorado uranium mining company from our traditional territories in northern Saskatchewan near Uranium City. They are now trying to revive all of these uranium deposits to usher in nuclear energy, which is being proposed as clean energy. The reality is that Indigenous people still face mounting pressures and manipulation from overlapping political and economic interests that are either seeking to protect nature or exploit nature within our lands and territories. And they're often doing this in the name of what is now being coined as green colonialism. And they're trying to red wash these things as good for nature and good for our people. This is also carbon markets. We're all talking about false solutions, and all these things are allowing is for business as usual within colonial capitalist regimes. This does not result in the reduced emissions of multinational oil and gas corporations. This is why the Alberta tar sands continues to expand, because they say, oh, we'll just find ways to offset it by buying carbon markets or buying carbon credits in other countries like the Amazon. But at the same time, they'll dig up uranium in northern Saskatchewan, offset it somewhere else. The connections to the CBD negotiations also need to be taken into consideration, where they're now trying to create another economic stream based off of biodiversity offset credits. We are talking about commodifying the entire natural world to allow colonial capitalism to perforate this planet and continue to destroy us all. I just want to say one last thing to you all. It's so easy to become detached from their connections to the natural world. I started crying when Casey was speaking because sometimes it's so easy to forget who we actually are. But the simple act of breathing on this planet means that you are connected to a tree that is cycling the carbon dioxide out of the air and turning it into oxygen for you. The simple act of breathing does not happen in isolation without nature. We are all connected, and we forget through circulated air in these spaces and these lights that try to take us so far away. And they try to sell us these false solutions and promises that we can continue to have our cell phones and our computer systems and fly across the globe to these negotiations. So we absolutely, why do we come? We come because we have to call out the fallacies of these systems, to disrupt these systems from continuing to be unabated and allow greenhouse gas emissions to proliferate, to allow green colonialism to come in and say they're going to save us all, but it's the people on this panel here that are saving the earth through the programs of WECAN, of reforestation, to the youth rising up, to Elder Casey Camp reminding us of what it means to be grounded in who we are. To the other two panelists, and I've forgotten your name. I can't say your names is what it is, to be honest. To our other two panelists that are on the front lines for women leading the way. This is what we need right now. These are the real solutions, not nuclear energy, not carbon markets, not biodiversity credits. These are the solutions.
That's right. And I want to give a big shout out to Amy Goodman for bringing this conversation to WECAN. We needed to talk about this huge threat of the nuclear energy and the undercurrents within COP29. Thank you.
So we're coming to the close of this really amazing session that has brought me to tears as well, hearing from everyone. I am really moved. I am thankful to all of you for all of the comments from Eriel, from Jie, from Casey, from Zukiswa, from Maho, just so we get everybody's names again, from all of you who came here today and shared your voices with us, and not to forget the little baby, the little one who's the most important person here, and to Amy Goodman for joining us. And also just to say that I really want everyone to be able to walk out of here more energized. See yourself, you know, in a space with the trees, with the land, with the breath that we just heard from Eriel, because we need our strength around us, and that comes from Mother Earth. That comes from our ancestors. That comes from all of us collecting together. That comes from our collective movements, because this space can really just wear you down and exhaust you. And so we're here for a very clear reason, which is I personally, and we as an organization, refuse to let governments meet, the lobbyists to meet, financial institutions to meet, and destroy and plunder our sacred Mother Earth and our communities. We refuse to have them be here without our resistance, without our voices, without our demands. We are here to say there is another way possible, and we will win. Because guess what? Mother Earth has the last bat. Mother Earth has the last bat. We will win.